You know what that means, right? At this time, I'm going to share with you a little tiny bit of what's on my little tiny mind this Shabbat. You know, in Devarim, Deuteronomy, which we would have read today, but I explained the Torah reading today. One of the lines is in 24, chapter 24, verse 1, and it says, it's actually 1 and 2, a man takes a woman into his household and becomes her husband. She fails to please him because he finds something obnoxious about her, and he writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house. Now, this shows something very misogynistic about what it says. I'm not defending it, and I'm not telling you you're wrong if you say it, because you're right. But what I'm about to talk about is something a little different. Keep this in mind because it's true. But the woman cannot ask the man for a divorce, and and he and in according to the way things are written, he doesn't have to give her one. But a woman has no choice. The woman just gets a divorce. But if the woman wants one, she can't just get one. And I know that, and it may sound like it's different from what I'm about to say, but it isn't. And I'll explain it at the end, all right? So don't get too confused. But I want to jump back to 1910. I'm sure we were all alive then in 1910. A guy by the name of Fred Murray, not Fred McMurray, Fred Murray, and R.P. Weston wrote a song. The song became a number one hit all over the world in 1965. It became very popular in the UK, here in the United States in 1965. But remember, it was written in 1910 and it wasn't very well known back then. So, the way it got famous is the late, great Ed Sullivan, who you may have known as Ed Solomon, he introduced them or introduced the song to the United States because it was sung by a group called Herman's Hermits. And I know if I would sing this song, every one of you could sing it with me. I know it. But I'm not going to sing it, and I'm not going to play it, because if I do, the copyright guys will shut it right off. But I will read the words. I am Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am, I am. By the way, since you're not magnified on the, you're not being, nobody can hear you, you're listening with no mic, you could sing it if you want. I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before. And everyone was an Henry. And everybody shouts, Henry. She wouldn't have a Willie or a Sam. No Sam. I'm her 8th old man. I'm Henry. Henry VIII, I am. And then the second verse is the same as the first. And then they have a guitar solo. And then the third verse is the same as the first and the same as the second. And then it ends, Henry, 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 Henry VIII, I am, I am. Henry VIII, I am, yeah. Okay. What a way to start a Devar Torah. Anyway, the song was about a gentleman by the name of Henry Tudor. Well, maybe he wasn't such a gentleman, but he was known as King Henry VIII of England. He wanted a divorce or at least an annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, because she would not give him a male heir. She couldn't have a son for some reason. So he wanted to marry the young Anne Boleyn, and he did. And the reason I say I'm not sure what a nice guy he was or not was he eventually beheaded her. Anyway, how good could he be? Sounds like he learned from King Ahasuerus on Haman with the Purim story. He beheaded Vashti. But Catherine, the first wife, and the Pope wouldn't give King Henry a divorce or an annulment. He just wouldn't go along with it. Neither one of them would. So the church was adhering to the Christian Bible's teaching. And here's a case where I'm going to read you the teaching. Most of you are going to know it. And it's from the book of Matthew, chapter 19:6, the Christian Bible. And why all of you know it, I don't know. Because you can't quote from the Jewish Bible these many things. Anyway, what the Lord has joined together, let no man rend asunder. I know some of you knew that, and there you go. But we all know that divorce was forbidden by the church, either for a man or woman. You couldn't get a divorce, and it's still true even to this day. However, the church does allow divorce, but does not allow divorce still, but it does allow annulment in certain limited cases. So they play a game by saying, well, they really were never married. It wasn't, quote, a kosher marriage. So they can annul. But Henry could not live with the fact that he could not receive a divorce or an annulment. So what did he do? I'm going to oversimplify this very complex situation by saying he broke from the Roman Catholic Church, which he did, and fathered a new religion, the Church of England. In other words, the Anglican Church was founded so that King Henry VIII could divorce his first wife. How about that? Judaism doesn't do anything like this. We don't have any traditions like this. Yes, I told you we do have a problem, but I'll describe that a little bit later. But the Torah does allow divorce, not simply for serious charges like adultery or desertion, but even for minor differences. Let me give you an example. The Talmud teaches that a man can divorce his wife even if she burns his breakfast. Again, this is very misogynistic. It's from the Mishnah Gittin, chapter 9, verse 10. You can look it up from Gittin, the Mishnah part. So this is considered to be the Torah that was spoken, Mishnah. It's not the Talmud. And if the marriage has so broken down that a couple is fighting over burnt food, they are not forced to stay in such an unhappy marriage. That's the logic behind it. In fact, it goes so far as to say, if a man even says he wants a divorce must happen. Again, the woman isn't included. But of course, you got to remember the times it was written, men could have more than one wife. Remember King Solomon had 1,000 wives. So I don't understand why that mattered much, but it did. It probably had to do with children. But again, I wasn't alive when the Torah was written or the Mishnah was given at Mount Sinai. I wasn't alive. If some of you were, you could explain it, but I can't. But whatever you have to know, this is to make sure. The reason it says if you want a divorce and you say it, if all you do is say, the words come out of your mouth, I want a divorce, you must have a divorce. This is like open mouth, insert foot. So don't get the wrong idea. You're not supposed to talk before you think. That's the point. Judaism tries very hard to discourage divorce, very hard. It is considered a sad last resort in a broken marriage. The Talmud teaches that if a man divorces the wife of his youth, even the altar of God cries tears. That's in Gittin, 90b. That's in the Talmud. Talmud Gittin 90b. Bet. Judaism wants a marriage to last a lifetime. It shouldn't be a stream of marriages and relationships. That is not the point of marriage. Marriage is supposed to be a holy and beautiful thing. People have, many of them have already been married 5 times. 5 times. Pamela Anderson, Nicolas Cage, Gary Oldman, Martin Scorsese, Joan Collins, George Foreman, Geraldo Rivera, Judy Garland, Rex Harrison, and Eddie Fisher. They were married 5 times. But that's not so bad. These people were married 6 times. Tony Curtis, Rue McClanahan, and Billy Bob Thornton. 6 times. And that ain't so bad either. Here's the 7 times. Elizabeth Taylor, Lana Turner, Greg Allman. 7 times. And what about 8 times? Larry King, Oliver Shalom. Mickey Rooney, 7 times. I'm sorry, 8 times. And then there's this one, whopping 9 times. 9 times. Zsa Zsa Gabor. You know, some of those people were Jewish that I mentioned. Most weren't, but many were. But that's not what Judaism has in mind. It's not supposed to be like that. I have to tell you, I feel very privileged to have been married to Lynn now for 45 years, as of the 10th of this month. 45 years. I wish that our marriage continues, especially since there were a couple of great hours dispersed among those years. She knew I was going to say that, by the way. But in all seriousness, the important question is, how can we make more marriages work? How can we do it? We shouldn't be so worried about divorce. Maybe we should think about, why do we get married in the first place? Maybe that's the problem. I have given that a lot of thought over the years. Of course, I have to. I mean, people come to me, they want a divorce, they want they want this, they want that. Yeah, then you wonder, how did they get married in the first place? You know, and I have to also tell you, I have stood under the chuppah with the couples that I didn't think were going to last long. Sometimes I was wrong, sometimes I was right, and that's one of the reasons I keep my mouth shut. I don't tell them, you know, I don't think you two should I never say that to people, no matter what I think, because I could be wrong. But a marriage isn't about you and me. It's not about you and me. It's about we as a couple. That's what it's about. 2 people. When I stand under the chuppah with a bride and groom, I speak to them and hope they have true love and affection and friendship for each other. You know, love doesn't always last. Friendship does last longer than love, usually. Lust doesn't last at all. I mean, that's gone. So we really wish they are good friends. They admire each other and they love each other. But they need to look into each other's eyes and want to meet the other person's needs. If you're marrying somebody because they meet your needs, you're doing something wrong, because that might not continue. But do you meet their needs? What do you have to do to meet their needs? Love is about serving the needs of the other person, not yourself. I let them know that they need to remain united, because if you just switch a few letters around, united becomes untied. Simple trick of moving a couple of letters. United becomes untied. So having said that, I'm aware that many marriages break down. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. But many people believe that lifelong monogamy is not a realistic goal anymore. Why? We live a lot longer now than our ancestors did. I mean, for them to live 35 or 40 years, getting married for a lifetime, 20 years, 25 years is a lifetime. They died. Today, 45 years I'm married, let alone living that long. So things are different today. I understand that. This is why we need to pay even more attention. Obviously, I do believe in marriage. We have to believe in marriage if marriage is going to work. If you don't believe in marriage, it's not going to work. But I, like our Torah and sages, also respect the fact that not every marriage will succeed. It won't. I know that. Everybody knows that. And there's nothing wrong, or you cannot judge people, I should say, if it doesn't succeed. Sometimes we're better off letting a marriage go. In fact, sometimes we stay in too long before we know better. Henry VIII had 6 wives. He divorced twice. He beheaded 2 of his wives. He outlived 1 wife. And in the end, his final wife outlived him. But since he beheaded 2 of them, I have to wonder how easy it must have been to be his wife. Perhaps he could have used some serious marriage counseling, but ignoring the Pope and committing murder, I doubt he was a good candidate for that. So in closing, I want us all to remember the great immortal words of the great American historian and philosopher Melvin James Kaminsky, better known as Mel Brooks, who said, "It's good to be the king." And I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom and an Am Yisrael Chai. And now I want to go back a minute and talk about the Aguna, the wife who is held captive, if you will. This is a serious problem in Judaism. We have a situation where certain men refuse to give a wife a divorce, a get. They refuse, just out refuse. Actually, they're allowed to do it, but it's really against Jewish law. It's kind of like it's against the law to eat bacon, but nobody can stop a Jew from eating bacon. Nobody can stop you. If you want to eat bacon, you're not allowed, but who's going to stop you? If you want to eat shrimp, you want to eat whatever, you want to eat treif, you're not allowed. It's a mitzvah not to do it, but who's going to stop you? It's a mitzvah to give a divorce, but nobody can stop you if you refuse. There's a problem. The rabbis caused this problem because of the way they interpreted what they interpreted. They can't go back and change it. They could actually. There's a process you could do called a takana, where you can go back and change a mitzvah. But we don't have the rabbis that are that respected today to be able to do that. So nobody would accept it. However, if there is in the conservative movement a thing called the Lieberman Clause, which goes on a ketubah, which forces the man to give a divorce, to give a get, if they get a civil divorce. So it's a legal document that he signs with witnesses that says that if he gets a civil divorce, he has no choice but to give a get. All right, so the get is automatic at that point. You don't have to ask him for it. It's automatic. In the Orthodox, they don't use that clause. They could, but they don't. But instead, they take people who refuse to give divorces or a get, and they throw them in jail. Or they make sure they get fired from their jobs. They make life miserable for them. And yet there are still mamzerim like that that won't give a divorce. And they stay in jail and they rot in jail and they don't care. They're disgusting people. These are idiots. These are sick. Now, many, many years ago, I would say maybe 30 years ago already, I proposed to the Vad HaRabbanim of America, the Orthodox, one of the Orthodox rabbinic organizations, to do a surrogate process where you don't ever ask. If you know your husband's not going to give you a get, don't ask. Don't ask him. Because once you ask him and he says no, you're done. You're finished. But if you go to a surrogate and ask, and the surrogate knows your husband, knows the husband, and the surrogate has no knowledge of why the person should not give a get, you use the surrogate as the person who comes to the bet din, and he says, I don't know any reason why a get should not be given. Those are the only words you can use. Anything else, no. It's got to be, I don't know why, and I know him well, and therefore, boom. And then a get can be given without the knowledge even of the person who's giving the get. And this has been done many times in the last number of years. Not just by me, by other rabbis. Many Orthodox rabbis are doing it now. But luckily this doesn't happen that often. But it does happen too many times. Frankly, if it happens once, it's too often. But because people are just not nice. So the Jewish law does not permit that. Well, it kind of doesn't, yeah. Jewish law doesn't permit a person to stay married, but they do. And there's nothing we can do about it except throw them in jail, take away close their bank accounts. And they do that in Israel. They do. But in this country, we can't. We can't do that. We don't have a theocracy here. So that's how we deal with it in this country. So I hope I answered that question for you. I know this is longer than I should take, but it's an important question. People always want to know about that because it's a horrible thing.